It's just an honor to be here, and it's just an intense pleasure to be on this panel, such a panel. So it seems to me that higher ed has primarily existed as a place, but as a place that sets aside a time, allows us to have a time apart so that we can learn in all the ways that we do. And that's a continuing value. I would be surprised if that went away, because the value of the physical, of geography, that's not really going to be leached away by the digital. But I think we all expect, and rightly, that there will be unexpected changes. So I want to talk about just one thread through this by looking at the change in books. And I do this with a great deal of trepidation with Dr. Darton here. And I want to look at three characteristics of books that are changing, because we are actually slightly pre-cusp. We're still using books as the ordinary means by which we preserve and communicate knowledge. That will change over time. And when it does, I want to point to three characteristics of books compared to links and what effect they might have, particularly on knowledge. So the first characteristic of books is that books are a profoundly disconnected medium. They have footnotes that point to other books, but they're really hard to follow. The footnotes. You got to go to a library and dig through the stacks. It takes a lot of effort to do that. So they are a disconnected medium, and that means that they want to get everything you need to know in one spot between covers. That has an effect on the nature of topics themselves. We think of topics as things that fit inside a book, and the book tries to complete the topic as best as it can, pick out a topic that will fit between covers, and sort of do a completionist job on it as much as possible. So our topics get sharp edges. They're bound, literally bound, within covers. Links are, on the other hand, they're hugely connective. That's, their entire point. They are connective. So we are increasingly seeing, I think, a type of knowledge and authority that consists of the ability to point beyond yourself, to have yourself be a node in a network. So, for example, Encyclopedia Britannica, the topic of philosophy, has 180,000 contiguous words in the Macropedia. And that bounds and covers the topic in a quite reasonable way. Wikipedia has 9,000 words, has 1/20th of it, but that would be an inaccurate comparison. 9,000 words is in fact long for a Wikipedia article, but it has hundreds of links in that 9,000 words. And so if you wanted to do an apples-to-apples comparison of Britannica to Wikipedia on the topic of philosophy, you would have to start following the links to see which articles you're going to count in Wikipedia. But that means you have to decide which of the Wikipedia's strategy is so different from that of a bound book, and it's exactly the same strategy as the web overall, which is to put in lots and lots of links. So you now have to decide whether the link to this or that should count in the word count of philosophy. So yes, the link to the Socrates article, definitely yes. The link to theology, to faith, you're going to have to decide. And so now the reader is the one who decides the loose edges of the topics. The topics have been blown apart and stitched together in very loose ways by links. Second characteristic of books is that they're basically scarce. There's a lot of them, but they're expensive to produce. They're hard to produce because they're done with atoms. And so we have a system whereby we filter by authorities. We have authorities and experts who filter. This system works quite well. We've gotten quite far with it, but it doesn't scale. It doesn't scale to web size. Google now apparently is saying that there are 1 trillion pages, something like that, out on the web. That means there are trillions of links. That's really big. That's more than a book system of authority. You couldn't put an authority in the middle of that system and say, would you mind taking a look at these trillion pages and telling us how they should be organized or which ones are worth our time or worth being included? So in the link world, we have a new strategy, which is include everything and then allow people to filter on the way out. And so we've spent much of the past 15 years as a culture inventing new ways of filtering, of finding what's worthwhile, making sense of it, and passing it around. And many of those ways are social. We rely upon our social networks of various sorts to do the filtering, which is a tremendously powerful tool. And we believe, although Google does not make its algorithms apparent, it seems pretty clear that Google itself and its search algorithms does pay attention to this sort of social filtering that's done. The tremendous dangers to social filtering as well, but it's a tremendous tool, and it's very different from relying upon a set of credentialed authorities, for good, for better, or for worse. So disconnected and scarce. And the third characteristic is that books give us a sense that that knowledge is masterable, that we can break off a chunk, a book-sized chunk, write about it, and feel pretty good that we've now mastered that topic. Links, not really so much. Links are a new type of punctuation that instead of telling us where to stop, they tell us to continue, how to continue. They invite us to continue. They tell us why we should continue on to the next point. And so the argument we've been having with the postmodernists the postmodernists have won. We've built the thing anyway. Regardless of the argument, we've built this incredibly messy, linked place in which you navigate and find your way through the vagaries of your social network, where you happen to be, who you happen to be are. A loose-edged, unmasterable world beyond anybody's competency to contain. The way that our system of authority had worked was that you break off a chunk of the world, you master it, or you find somebody who has, and if you have a question, then the system is set up so that you can come to a stopping point. Your inquiry can end. You can get your answer and move on, which is an important evolutionary strategy because we need to, build upon what we know. We can't always go back to first principles. And so that's a good system, and it doesn't go away, but it's not the only system. So increasingly, in a linked world, we expect the authorities that we're going to for our stopping points also to have embedded within them links that take us to the arguments for what's been said and the arguments about what's been said. And that is the fact that we know that there's always an argument about what's been said is the obviousness of this, the evidence of this in front of our eyes in almost every case is new and different. So, 3 ways books are characteristic books that are changing. They're disconnected, they're scarce, and they give a sense of knowability. This, I believe, is actually pretty good news for higher education. Because the net is more of everything, it means that the old ways of knowing don't go away. If you want to specialize deeply in the adolescence of Leibniz, you can. Your work will be easier and will be more widely shared. So that continues to exist. Second of all, the net fills every interstice, so that between courses in a classroom and everything else, every spot in the ecology is being filled with open courseware and with book clubs that you find through Craigslist. And this is wonderful for educators. And finally, after 100 years of broadcasters implicitly telling us, here's what the world is, and what they show us are things that appeal to the broadest possible audience for economic reasons on the internet, we, our students, as educators, discovered that the world is way more interesting than anybody ever told us. And that is wonderful news for educators. Thank you.